So it really revolutionized the lunar surface exploration.
Boy, Houston, the beauty of this place is just absolutely incredible.
Duke and Young drive the rover hard for nearly 17 miles over rugged terrain. Parked at the landing site, it documents Apollo 16 blasting off from the lunar surface.
What a ride, what a ride.
Apollo 17 targets another geologically rich area of the moon. But this will be Project Apollo's final lunar landing. Budget cuts force NASA to scrub 3 more missions already scheduled.
We were disappointed because they canceled 18, 19, and 20. We had the hardware. We had crews picked. And all it was operational money.
NASA wants the last moon mission to be their greatest. The landing site demands the first night launch of the giant Saturn V rocket. On board, Ron Evans is command module pilot. Harrison Schmitt is NASA's first scientist in space. And the commander of Apollo 17 is Gene Cernan, a veteran of Gemini 9 and Apollo 10.
Apollo 17 was a real goal of mine. I knew before we launched that Apollo 17 was going to be the last flight to the moon, and I knew I would be the guy who make the final steps on the moon. There are a lot of people, I think, in positions of responsibility within NASA who, being the last flight, just wanted me to get back alive.
More than 500,000 people come from all over the world to watch the final lunar launch.
Roger, we're go for liftoff here, Captain.
Apollo 17 is Gene Cernan's second trip to the moon. On Apollo 10, he flew a lander to within 47,000 feet of the lunar surface. This time, he's cleared to land.
I needed to go back in Apollo 17. I wanted to cover the last 47,000 feet. I've been to the moon, folks. I'm not going back again, not to land. And I think people knew that. Obviously, I was not going to do something dumb, but I was going to land.
You're looking real good, Jim. Right down the line.
Stand by for touchdown. Stand by. 25 feet. Down at 2. Feels good. 20 feet. Going down at 2. 10 feet. 10 feet. That contact. Stop, push. Engine stop. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt join an elite fraternity. Only 12 men have landed on the moon.
As I step off at the surface at Taurus Littrell, Central. We'd like to dedicate the first steps of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible.
Over the next 3 days, Cernan and Schmidt spend more time walking on the moon than any other astronauts.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. May, that's right. May is the year of the month.
A team of scientists monitors their work.
Hey, there is orange soil. Well, don't move it till I see it. It's all over. Orange. Don't move it till I see it. I've stirred it up with my feet. Hey, it is! I can see it from here. It's
Okay,
orange.
Let's think about this thing logically. You know, they're up against a constraint anyway, so they got to leave at a certain time regardless of what we got.
We'd like you to leave immediately. Okay. My golly, this time goes fast.
3 years after Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon, Gene Cernan prepares to be the last.
When I crawled up the ladder, I knew I wasn't going to be coming this way again. And I just wanted to stop time. I wanted to freeze time. I want to take advantage of this moment.
Okay, 1 minute, Houston. We're 50 seconds now, and we're go. You're looking good here.
It's only 11 years since Alan Shepard became the first American in space and John Kennedy challenged the U.S. to go to the moon. Now, Apollo 17 is the end of an era.
It's like the breaking off a love affair. You've had a marvelous time, but now it's time to bring that relationship to an end.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Burn away, Houston. Vector good. Back start. Victor. Sure you have good thrust.
Cernan and Schmidt start the long journey home. The camera on the rover will transmit pictures back to Earth for another 27 hours. The final images from man's last trip to the moon. Having explored the lunar surface, NASA shifts gears to learn to live long-term in space.
You know, engineers want to do something different. So they said, hey, we've been there, we've done that, and let's do something else.
We proved to ourselves that we can go somewhere and survive. So now the next step is going to be a much bigger one.
If we're ever going to go to Mars, we've got to understand what happens to humans and machinery when they spend a year or two in space.
NASA develops a radical new spacecraft, using a Saturn V rocket left over from the scrubbed Apollo missions.
It was a good use of the hardware we had to develop Skylab. It was a space station.
The big insight was that you could use the third stage of the great big Saturn V rocket as a habitable place to live.
Launching Skylab into orbit won't demand the rocket power that sent men to the moon. NASA converts the top of a Saturn V into the first American space station.
It's been compared to the size of a small 3-bedroom house. Each had our own bedroom. Each bedroom was about the size of a telephone booth, and the beds were fastened to the wall.
The commander of Skylab's first crew is Pete Conrad, who flew 2 Gemini missions and Apollo 12. Rookie Paul Weitz is the pilot. And another rookie, Joseph Kerwin, is the science pilot.
We could stuff it with experiments. We could put the food and water up there for 3 missions. We could do it all, and it was great.
Skylab and crew will launch on separate rockets.
This beautiful big Saturn V with the workshop on it was to launch on May 14th, and it would get into the correct orbit, and the next day we would launch.
Not since Gemini 6 and 7 has NASA attempted 2 launches so close together. The unmanned Skylab flies first.
The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up. Skylab has cleared the tower.
Looked like a great launch.
Went right up into the sky as far as we could see it and was on its way successfully.
Pretty soon, the news from Mission Control began to get bad. There had been a G-shock and a sudden acceleration on the way up. They didn't know what caused it.
Skylab space station now in orbit. Still some doubt in the minds of flight controllers here in Mission Control as to whether the main solar panels on the workshop have indeed deployed.
One of them didn't respond at all. The other one, just a trickle of current that they could see.
The planned 28-day mission is not possible without the workshop main solar panels.
Meanwhile, the temperatures, both outside and inside of the workshop, began to rise. We have insufficient electrical power, we have temperatures that are out of control. It looks like the heat shield is gone.
We just had to sit around and wait and worry and wonder whether or not we were going to end up getting a mission or whether we were going to lose the whole mission.
People in Mission Control were about ready to give up, I think.
The second response 5 minutes later was, come on, we're engineers, let's get to work on this thing and see what we can do.
They stopped the next launch, and they said, now your job has changed from activating the workshop to saving the workshop and then activating.
Skylab's biggest problem is heat from the sun. Engineers quickly design a giant parasol.
They not only had to understand the problem, they then had to design the hardware. They had to build the hardware. They had to test the hardware, package it for flight, and get it to the spacecraft.
After a 10-day delay, Kerwin, Conrad, and Weitz finally launch, NASA's first repairman in space.
T-minus 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Engine sequence start. 2, 1, 0. We have launch commit and we have liftoff. The clock is running and Skylab has cleared the tower.
8 hours after launch, they rendezvous with Skylab and see the damage close up.
Houston is now controlling.
Pete flew our command service module around and we took not only photographs but also television whose images could be dumped to the ground. And that was priceless because it gave the engineers working on the ground a good look at what was wrong.
Roger, copy. In brief description, his suspected solar wing is gone.
The crew has to enter Skylab to repair it.
Completely off the bird.
270 miles above the Earth. Traveling at more than 17,000 miles an hour. Pete Conrad must perform a precise hard dock.
We went to dock and